Hello, everybody. Today is Wednesday, August 2nd. It is 4:02. Call this work session of the New Shoreham Town Council to order. Hi, Martha. For just for background, because it didn't make the paper. I would have been happy to tell them that we actually asked Nick Solitro, the town solicitor, to put together a straw man ordinance, basically taking stuff that exists in other towns throughout Rhode Island and Nick, I don't mean this word offensively, but dumping it into a draft, basically.
Yep.
I don't know if folks know, but you may not recognize Nick Solitro in person. Usually he's only in 2 dimensions. Today he's in 3.
I like to say the great laws, but that's neither here nor there.
And I thought today, Nick, it would be worthwhile to go through this draft, talk about the stuff that we hit and don't hit, talk about the stuff that doesn't fit. There's even some stuff in the findings that, that are cribbed from other places that we want to take out. Molly, do you have anything you wanted to add to that? No? Is that approach?
What is on the agenda today?
Just short-term rentals.
Just short-term, is everybody aware of that in the audience?
I don't know.
I think we have some people who want to speak during open comment.
We don't have open
Public,
comment
we don't
during
have
work
public
sessions.
comment.
Yeah.
Can I say something?
No.
What?
I mean, if you're going to go through this, it's
No,
not.
I'm not, I
Okay.
won't. But no, I didn't realize that I couldn't speak because it
Yeah.
said at the beginning of the block item on the bulletin about this meeting that anybody from the audience who would like to speak. So that's why I'm here, and if I can't, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's fine. But I would like you to have that information.
Great. And this is going to be on our agenda next week, I think. So,
But
That's why I was so
I
baffled
gave
this
you yours,
morning,
but-
I didn't think,
Do you have an extra copy, Judy?
thank you for allowing me
Judy?
to ask.
Do you have an extra copy?
I gave him one.
Oh, and then you gave me,
There's some up there.
okay, good.
yes, we have an
May
extra.
I approach?
Thank you.
Please be seated.
So anyway, that's pretty much everything right there.
Yep.
And I'll come back when there's a Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Judy.
Sorry, guys.
No, sorry.
People getting confused. What?
There,
Wait,
Okay, so,
there,
they're
there, will,
getting confused that there's not gonna be, this is gonna be discussed.
there will be public comment if we decide to consider an ordinance. We're just trying to put together a draft that would be put before the town at some point in the fall. That's,
I think some of them were confusing Judy's thing with the other, that's all.
oh, gotcha.
that's why, I thought that's why they're here, that's why I asked, because.
right, so to go back to, I just think it's important to say that this is a working document. This is a jumping off spot. This isn't any sort of a complete document. It has all the components that a short-term rental ordinance has, but as Nick and Keith said, they've pieced this together from examples from other towns in the state that have already passed them. So part of this may be similar to Middletown, part of it may be similar to Westerly, but in the end, we're going to adjust everything to be Block Island.
Terrific. Hey, Nick, do you want to start walking us through? How do you want to do that?
I'd love to go paragraph by paragraph.
Yeah, that's definitely what I
Yeah,
want
because
to
I
do.
think,
Nick, why don't you walk us through,
sure.
because I know everybody has comments on, did you look over there for Nick?
Can I, before that, Keith, is it possible
Please.
you could give an overview as to the objective?
Sure,
I mean, broad.
Yes, are you talking about the objective today?
Or of short-term STRs?
So, Sure. Molly actually brought this to me as an idea because so many towns, I guess for at least two reasons, because A, so many towns were considering these. And we were both noticing that they were especially contentious in some towns because there seemed to be some conflict between town government and the short-term rental market. That's not where I am, and I don't think where anybody is. Having said that, with the rise of new portals, Airbnb, VRBO, et cetera, the rental market is different. Some of them are very short-term. Some of the rentals create ancillary burdens on town services. And you know, this is, you know, you and I have talked about this. This is sort of a, even though other towns have done it, it's very different and it's a big idea. And I think I happen to think it's a good idea on some level, and is worthy of the council's and the town's consideration.
Perfect, thank you.
Did I miss anything, Molly?
Other reasons to enact this or to consider it would be supporting our year-round housing. So there's been a shift, right? So traditionally, we have, I mean, house rentals out here are forever. But traditionally, they've been administered by a real estate agency that has an office in town. If there's a problem at that house, the police and everyone else know that, you know, that house goes with this agency. We're going to call them, they're going to deal with this problem. So that isn't so much the case anymore. As Keith said, we have online platforms, you have absentee owners, you have people who, like, 3 weeks out of the summer, they're renting it through a rental agency, and 5 weeks out of the summer, they're renting it themselves, and their friend's boyfriend's sister is the one who's like the contact for that. And I think what we're looking to do is standardize it a little bit, say, like, we need you to fill out the form. We want to know. Town needs to know. The town needs to enumerate this. We have a lot of people. It's a business. It's a business. And as a business, it's driving a lot of traffic down little dirt roads where people's cats are getting run over. And, you know, you want to be respectful of the neighbors, right? So the neighbors need to know who's renting that house. How often is that house turning over? Something that came up at the last meeting that we discussed was, should houses in residential A be rented for less than a week? Then creating all that extra traffic twice a week on rights of way.
Which is not just people, it's the cleaning crews and all that stuff.
It's everybody, right? Like, I mean, it could be a huge number of service vehicles and the renters, right? So, but the other thing is, there's also a turnover in homeowners, right? So this is a real problem. A real problem is that in an accessory building, there's a 513. The next owner abandons the use of that 513. The next owner says, that's a fabulous little spot above my garage. If I just stick a microwave oven in there, I can rent that by the week. And it's not legal, but it doesn't mean they're not doing it. That's first of all, it violates our zoning code. And the second thing it does is if you want to rent that, you can, but the only way you can legally do that in most places is as a 513. So if you're renting it in some other fashion, you are eroding year-round housing. So that's something that we can address by this. So that's,
Perfect, thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we're all on the same platform.
Go ahead, Nick.
Sure, thanks, Keith. And yeah, to reiterate, there was a request where considering short-term rentals as far as crafting an ordinance or the desire to craft an ordinance. So what we did was we looked at other cities and towns in Rhode Island, a number of which have already done this. There was a push maybe 2 or 3 years ago to pass these type of ordinances. So we looked at what worked for other towns and put before you certainly a comprehensive ordinance that incorporates everything out there. And I fully expect this council to strike things, add things, but by way, I'll use you as an example, Neil. Molly, I know you've done a lot of research on this, but Neil, who I'll use as an example, maybe you haven't. I wanted to put in front of you all the options out there so you can decide what you believe would work best. Maybe you haven't looked into short-term rentals. So that was the thought in this, and I know some people in the audience are interested about why certain things are in there. The intent was to be over-inclusive so that we know what our options are. That being said, what I'll do is I'll paraphrase a lot about what's in here. We don't need to get bogged down in the legalese, but we can go through with what each section tries to do. I think that would make sense. So my suggestion would be we jump to the second page, which is registration and inspection required. That's what this ordinance does at its core.
Can I add one thing?
Sure,
on the
please.
Legislative findings and intent. I do think if we're going to do findings and intent, that it's important to talk about the fact that tourism and visitors are are the bedrock industry for the island. You know, they're essential to our economy. I don't want, I just want to, and I'm happy to work with you on language about that, but to me, that's important.
And just to be clear, that's why I asked with that overview, because like when you say it can be detrimental or negative impacts on the community, it starts off a little
Yeah.
negative versus, hey, this is positive. So that was why I asked you.
Yeah,
'Cause yes.
absolutely.
In that area, you folks have carte
Yes,
blanche.
yes.
You do what you see fit. You're the legislators. Your legislative intent comes directly from you.
Yep.
So keep you might like, change what you don't like, by all means. That's all
Yep.
on you guys.
Absolutely.
So second page, registration inspection required. In short, it requires registration with the town for rentals that are 30 days or less. With that, there's an annual registration requirement. So once a year, folks who choose to do this, engage in short-term rentals or renting their properties on a short-term basis, apply with the town, or register with the town, rather. There's a provision that a number of cities and towns have where an inspection is allowed. It doesn't have to happen in every instance, but it's allowed by ordinance where often the fire chief or municipal representative goes into the structure for safety reasons, make sure there's fire detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, and the like. The next section goes for registration and term. Again, I touched on that. Registration has to be filed by December 31st, the end of the year. It just made sense. And a fee has to be paid. Later on in this, we get to the fee. Most cities and towns use a $200 fee. You have discretion there, but that's what we see a lot with other cities and towns. Registration form, we outline what would be required in this registration form to be submitted when you go to apply. What we're looking for is to learn what units are being rented. What's the occupancy level of that unit? How many folks might we expect there? How many cars might we expect there? A lot of that stems from public safety concerns. Fee, I just touched on that. It'd be a $200 annual registration fee. Why do we charge a fee for this? There's a lot of concern from the town staff as to the man hours that would go into a program like this. So at least in part, it would be to offset the work that goes into it from town staff or what have you. Next goes to occupancy limits. A big concern that cities and towns tend to have, and I think may be a concern here, is that we have short-term rentals that are over-occupied. Maybe two-bedroom with 10 people there, or 14 people there, it turns into a party house. That's what we're trying to avoid, or at least what I understand we're trying to avoid. So we set forth an occupancy limit, which is governed by the amount of bedrooms. So as drafted, it would be 2 people per bedroom. So a 4-bedroom house could have 8 folks living there. We didn't count children. I don't think young children are the problem, although I defer to you. I know we got a few pieces of correspondence in suggesting that not counting bodies be much younger, 1 or 2 years old, 3 or 4 years old, not 12. Number of cities and towns choose 12, that's why we put it before you. But it's somewhat of an arbitrary number, so that's up to the council. Within that section, and towards the bottom, subsection C.
Can I just ask
Please.
just a question that was raised in some correspondence we received? So if I have a house that has an accessory structure, not a 513, but, you know, an extra bedroom above the garage, I can't rent out the extra bedroom above the garage, but I could call it, it is a bedroom, so if one renter were renting it on a short-term basis, it could include the room over the garage, right?
My understanding
Right.
is the way our zoning is written, and I'm going to leave a lot of room for I
Yeah,
could be
yeah,
wrong.
I may not have asked the question.
Yeah, and I don't think Jen is here to actually clarify this for me, but I believe that you can include that in your rental.
Right, okay,
Yeah,
that's-
so the
that's part of the
accessory
problem,
structure
yes,
goes
it's part
with
of
the
the problem.
house.
Part of
It's-
the property.
I just
right.
wanted to clarify.
So you can include that, but you cannot rent it separately.
yes.
So you can't have a situation where, you know, Neil's family is renting the house and my family is renting the barn
Right.
separately, and we don't know each other.
Can't have 5 renters of 5 bedrooms,
Yes.
which is, that's.
It would be under one rental
yeah.
contract, be under one
Thank-
rental
thank you.
registration.
I just wanted to clarify that because I saw that question. Yeah.
So under occupancy location, subpart C, we get to parking. And this, I may expect, not to put the spotlight on myself with this one, but might be contentious because it prioritizes parking, and it prioritizes it in a manner that if you don't have enough parking on site, your occupancy limit that you can rent to folks is limited. So for instance, if you have a 4-bedroom, I just want to make sure I have the numbers right. If you have a 4-bedroom structure, meaning you could otherwise have 8 folks renting, but only have 1 parking spot on site, then you can only have 2 people there.
But that's because you define grass as a non-parking area.
Correct.
So, and I'm going to
Correct.
say 40% of the houses here are all grass.
And
Or-
that-
or you might as well be grass.
Yeah.
You know, so I think that is where the line may be drawn differently on Block Island.
Yeah, so I think we got a lot of feedback on this in correspondence. And I think this might be an area where we can definitely
Yeah.
rewrite a lot.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, but grass, by saying you can't park on the grass, that defines parking spaces as something. But Block Island is so different that I think we just need,
Right, and I think most of the real estate agents, I mean, I could be wrong, but I believe most of them already delineate this in a contract. So like if you, I can think of one house in particular that really only has space for 3 cars. I don't know, but I'm sure it says that in the contract, you know, that you can only bring 3 cars, because there's no place else to go. But,
I do like the where are people going to park question.
yeah, me too.
You know what I mean?
also, we have to remember that a lot of houses are not renting through a real estate agency.
Right.
Our real estate agencies have already herded the cats, right? So they're already saying to the homeowner, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? But when the homeowner buys their new house and decides that they're gonna make so much more money renting it themselves, these are things we're gonna have to
Right.
make them
Yep.
think about.
So with that, in short, the reason I prefaced it with the spotlight's going to be on this one,
Yes.
because I knew it was going to be contentious.
Yes.
If lawn parking isn't a concern of the council, we take that out, and then parking's no longer an issue. But again, in giving you all your options, we wanted to put that there. But judging by the input here, that's something that easily could be tweaked.
Yeah.
So we'll continue on with owner obligations.
Hold on, before we move on from parking, I think there are a couple of things. I don't think anybody here wants to be creating parking spaces and making people, pave parking spaces or do whatever. But I don't think that means that we don't want to limit the number of cars. I mean, that seems to be to me, that's one of the biggest problems we have, of all these houses that are rented, that are outside of the rental agencies. And I know the rental agencies have a hard enough time, and they've got a bigger hammer dealing with the number of cars people bring. But I just want to be clear, at least as far as I'm concerned, I don't want to be creating parking spaces. But that doesn't mean I think you should be able to have as many cars as you want either.
So kind of to what you're saying, I think it's important to actually make the homeowner draw the picture of where the parking is, because obviously, people can't park on top of septic systems, wells, and the majority of our homes are not on town water and sewer, so that's an issue. I think most homeowners already delineate that, and this isn't going to be a hard thing for them to draw a picture to include with their application about where the parking is.
So to Molly's point, part of the application or the registration process is a parking plan, as drafted, if you folks choose to go with that. The next section brings us to informing the renters of basically what's going on. A property owner would give to the renters of the property a copy of their registration, letting them know what the rules and requirements are. That would include the parking plan, so that the folks who are renting know exactly what they can and can't do on the property, know where they can and can't park on the property. Going down, and again, we're under owner's obligations. From what I understand, an issue has come up where maybe there's a party or some type of disturbance, and town staff, including the police, don't know who to contact. We want to have a person that we contact, a representative, and that we'll get to that later. But also, we want our property owners to have up-to-date information for their renters, so that they can deal with those issues and snub them out. So we require the property owners to have updated information for their renters. Subsection C, posting of information within the dwelling. That's just, again, to provide our renters with the rules of the land there. Tenant obligations. This indicates the obvious, that the tenants are responsible for their behavior on the property, and they can be held responsible for any violations of the law. Next is local representative. This is what I touched on a minute ago, is the town, if you so choose, would require there be a local representative that could be contacted if there's an issue. That person would have to respond within a reasonable amount of time. We suggest 2 hours from an attempted contact by police. And again, the thought is the party-type atmosphere. We need to stop an issue going on. We need to be able to call somebody and have that person responsive to the property. We then get down to enforcement, where violations can be.
So Molly, can I just ask a question? So, and I'm probably jumping the gun here a bit, but and this kind of goes to the enforcement. So currently, if a tenant who's gone through an agent violates something in the town, I don't even know if this has happened, but if the town were to fine them, are we fining the owner or the tenant?
Currently,
Yeah,
like, I don't know what we would be finding anybody for. Right,
say a renter has a noise disturbance.
Yeah. do we have a
And,
fine for that?
yeah,
I don't know.
so I guess from a rent. Just doesn't happen, or?
Well, if they do something against our rules, we kick them out.
Right, yeah.
Okay,
But that's your relationship.
That's their in their contract.
Right.
Lease.
okay,
But see,
Not
we,
through the owners, because we're managing that property
Right.
for the owners.
Okay.
that time period.
And that's where, like I said before, like, the real estate agents that we have they're already
Right.
herding the cats for us. Like, they're taking care of that.
Well, the reason I'm asking is if we're talking about a third-party renter, and you get into fining and violations, that's a bit of a quagmire, even if you know who it is. So if I'm an Airbnb renter, that owner, how is he going to get additional money from them?
Okay, why aren't we just finding the people who are causing the problem?
Well, but that's what I'm saying. That's my point, but what's if I'm here for 2 nights, and again, I'm jumping the gun a little bit.
If you're here for 2
If I
nights, you
disappear in 2
misbehave.
nights, who's going after me? Does it default to the owner?
So that's a good question that we should
So just
find out.
something
I
to,
don't know.
Well, we have to
Find out the answer. to.
take care of it immediately. We drag you down to the police station immediately. We used to do that.
yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure why we're making everything so much more complicated than it has to be. I think one of the biggest problems we have, I mean, in my neighborhood, I don't know, I can't tell where sound's coming from anyway, but theoretically, if there was some big problem, by the time you call the police, depending upon what the police have got to do, you know, it's going to be a while before they're down there.
Well, we're going to start parking cars down on your property.
Good luck. I've got a friend with a Kubota. And, yeah, she's,
Hey, you're on a roll, Nick. Don't let him derail you.
my dog is pointless.
Take the handle.
So Neil, to your point, that's under enforcement. In short, you're going to have a few options. Do you want to hold owners responsible for certain acts of their tenants? And I know the response from the public, we don't have public comment, unfortunately, today, but will be that there's a disconnect. How can I
Well, and the
try my-
reason being, if rental agents are on the hook of managing stuff, and I have an owner, to me, there's a piece of almost make the owner responsible for it. But again, cart before the horse, so.
And that's why we're having the discussion. You can get creative with it. Maybe the more procedural issues, failing to register or failing to include a parking plan, that's on the owner, that's on them. But the more disturbance type activities where an owner, they're not there. They try their best to rent to responsible people. But if you have some knuckleheads that are causing trouble, do we really want to be fining an owner $200? We can get creative and carve that out where that's not on an owner.
Well, and I don't hate to interrupt, but plus they can write that out on the lease, that they're
Yeah.
not responsible
Right.
for any of that. So that, legally, that would be, they wouldn't be responsible for anything the tenant does in the house while they're there.
But wouldn't we want to be, and I don't even know how bad things are out there. I mean, we're making it sound like we're,
Worried about it.
I don't, everything's running wild. It may well be on the west side, I don't know.
Why
But,
would she?
but do you want to be fining the owner, or do you want to be fining, this is like my thing about drinking on the street. Do you want to take the liquor away from the person who's being bad and make it really hurt them and make them not do it again?
No, no,
Because
no.
if you find, I know where you're going, Neil, I'm just saying,
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you immediately just get the person who's misbehaving and make them pay the fine, that they may think twice.
I don't think anybody's disagreeing
Yeah.
there. I think we have a sense that the owner is responsible for registration, but they're not responsible for playing LA Woman at 3 a.m. At volume 100.
Keep going.
That's what John Mott's doing. It's great.
Can I say something about that?
Yes.
You might, what about maybe?
You're going to have to use the microphone.
She did.
Oh, Bill McComb.
I'm wondering if maybe you would want a provision for repeat offenses for a homeowner that might,
Have a party house.
yeah.
Interesting.
It's an idea.
and
It's an idea.
market-
It's an idea.
And market to a crowd,
Yeah.
or have
Yeah.
repeat
Yeah.
guests every summer, you know, like the same thing that people do,
Yeah,
that are problematic.
Yep.
thank you, Renee. All right, Nick.
That just brings us to the end where fines for violations of the ordinance, we suggest $200. That's the maximum jurisdiction of your warden's court. That's why that's there. If we had more jurisdiction with respect to Warden's Court, it would be suggested as more, but that's where we're at with our jurisdiction, as provided by state law.
So can I start backwards a little bit, Keith?
We can start however you want.
Well, backwards only because it was just
Yeah.
left. So as I look at this, I mean, I'm all in favor of continuing to support our rental markets. To all the comments Molly made, this is not about the agencies. This is sort of making sure that everybody's on level ground. But this is going to require a full-time, based on what I'm reading, a full-time employee. It's going to require work at the clerks. I mean, this is not I don't see this as a small thing.
No, it's
And
not.
so I guess starting, I see, and it would be interesting to find out how many houses we're actually talking about, because I'll make a number up, but I see this much more at $1,000 registration fee than 200. I fear that if we're down into 200, we're making a whole lot of work and a whole lot of noise, and I don't see how it's not a huge cost to the town. So just so people know where I'm at, I like a lot of this, but I want to make sure we're not, that we cover our costs. Just as an aside.
So, I had this discussion with, the, land use officer, and the land use officer has said that we have an existing program that's like a statewide, software, that could be formatted to incorporate this. So it wouldn't take, the clerk, you would register online. The homeowner would go online to this register. They would pay by credit card. It doesn't take up the time of the clerk. We could format this that, like, let's say you're somebody who's like, I don't know how to use a computer. I want to do this in person. We could have a surcharge for that. We could say, sure, you can come in and you can file the paperwork with Millie, and there's a $20 surcharge for that. But what the land use officer indicated is that this could be, and there would be hours that would have to go into, on the front end, to formatting the computer program. And then there would also have to be initial, so like a straight up single-family home who wants to rent for the summer, like they have forever, really not a problem. They just have to like fill it out, check all the boxes.
You've never gone and checked number of bedroom, people per bedroom. Are you 2 people per bedroom? Do you have cars in the right
The
parking
homeowner, the
spaces?
homeowner is gonna have to sign off on all this. The homeowner's gonna have to sign off to say, I have 4 bedrooms, I have a 4-bedroom septic system, I posted the fire number at the end of my driveway, I have the fire number on my house, I am posting all the homeowner has to take responsibility. They look at the checklist, they say, I've done all these things. But we do have in here that the town may send somebody out to check that out if they decide they want to. Or if they have a reason to not trust it, they could send somebody out. But anyway, according to the land use officer, there will be some work on the front end for, like, every so often you'll get to like a building, like a house that has an accessory structure, or a house that has a 513 on the property, like where you have to like stop and like evaluate that a little bit more deeply. But they didn't think that this was going to be super onerous to the point of hiring somebody else, maybe hiring a part-time clerk in the beginning.
I beg to differ. I beg to differ a lot.
I-
but that's just,
Just
no, I'm the good
Transmitting the
information.
conversation, yeah.
So what we've established is we need to figure out how much this is going to cost. And back, and use that in essence to figure out a number.
Maybe I'm wrong, yeah.
I don't know, but yeah, if you don't mind.
How are you gonna know the ones that are renting that aren't
Right.
in the realtor offices? Like, that's where
Yep.
it has to be tied into something. Because I know, I mean, with housing, the housing tax that we started all those years ago, where people paid the 1%, sometimes we had a problem collecting that from people that
Sure.
rented because
Yeah.
so that's where, like, I think the problem has to be tied into something that they're penalized if they don't register.
Yes.
Okay,
But you,
change it.
websites and you gotta go through.
Right, and that is there, so
They
the,
might miss 3 years of not registering and get away with it before you catch them, or, so that's where the time is gonna be spent.
right, so most towns that do this, right, when you go on to the website to register your, so most of the, and I've talked to some of the people who are the compliance officers in these towns, and there's two big buttons that you can click on. One says, I would like to register my short-term rental, and the other one says, I would like to complain about a short-term rental. And you have to, you're not faceless if you want to complain, but if you want to say, I believe my neighbor is renting out the apartment in their garage illegally, you can do that. Your name goes on it. I mean, it's not like you're gonna get outed, but I'm just saying it's not, there's nothing anonymous in these towns. You have to give the plat and lot number, and you have to give a description of the violation you believe is occurring. But the other thing that these towns do is every rental, like, so if you fill out the paperwork, you get your license, it has a number. And then every time you advertise anywhere online, so if it's an online listing at Lila Dowman or an online listing on Airbnb or VRBO, it has to have your current rental number. Now, the state last year started a short-term rental license, registry, thank you. But when I spoke with them, he was like, yeah, it's just a registry. It's not, and he was like, it's not based on, it doesn't mean you can get that. You pay your, whatever it is, $15 or something, and you get your number from the state, but they don't do any back legwork. They don't go to the town of New Shoreham or the town of Westerly and determine that that is actually a legal rental. You just got, so it's a little bit like saying you're a sheriff when you got the badge out of the cereal box, right? Like, it's that great.
I just think that you'll have people that won't register, even though they're renting, but you can catch them because they have to advertise it,
Yes.
so.
Yeah,
So
and that'll be,
That's where some of the work has to be done
Yeah.
ahead of time,
right,
that, will cost money.
It's a good
or
And during the
research,
time.
Yeah.
because you have to actually mark down homeowners that are renting from VRBO and all that, and it'll change always, but,
Yeah.
that's where, and I don't even, there's some that I don't know about
Yeah.
that rent.
well, and that's where we're relying on other people within the community to help their neighbors adhere to the zoning policies.
But in a small community though, putting your name on a complaint doesn't happen as much
I'm
as.
just saying, while I was talking to
Yeah, no, I get it.
while I was talking to the zoning official, she got a complaint in her
Yeah,
email,
right.
so.
Yeah.
So, and I think Keith captured, my comment is just, I want to make sure costs are covered and costs are realized. And-
Yeah.
And I can't imagine 200's a real number
I don't
in
think,
our math.
I agree with you completely. I don't think that's anywhere near reality. I mean, I don't know if anybody here remembers, when we first got dispatch, Paul Riker and Peter Blaine presented it as it wasn't going to cost anything because it was going to be paid for by alarm fees. And they believed it, they wouldn't have said it otherwise, but it certainly didn't work out that way. I mean, dispatch is great, I don't know what we do without them, but that's not, the point is, we've been down this road before, if it's not going to cost much, and it always does.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, Cindy. I didn't see you there. I was reading.
Cindy Pappas. I think this program, as drafted loosely, is very expensive. I think there's a lot of hidden costs in this program. But I wanted to go back to where the meeting started originally, which was what Sven said, let's talk about the general overview of why we're spending the time and energy on this draft legislation. So it's still not completely clear in my mind what the problem is that we are trying to solve. And this is just a discussion, not criticism, just it's still not entirely clear what problem we're trying to solve, what issues are we experiencing that are onerous that we're trying to solve? Or are we just being proactive? That's another good thing to be. And scale of the response equivalent to the size of the problem. So I'd just like to have that overview on this discussion, because it feels like this is a pretty high-intensity, very expensive solution to exactly what? Just a question.
So I think just by the sheer number of towns, especially tourist towns, that have short-term rental ordinances, we're not proposing anything extraordinary. Affordable housing or year-round housing, maybe not affordable, but year-round housing is one of the big goals with this in a twofold way. One is encouraging 513s, and the other is with the 1% tax. So if the homeowner fills out the whole form, we have all their, now the town has all their contact information, right? Because a lot of these homes are owned by an LLC. There's no contact information for them. This way, we know, we have a list of everybody who has this license. If the town clerk doesn't receive the 1% tax, it's a very easy business to say, hey, we haven't heard from you. Do you have your 1%? Have you filed it? Or do you need help filing it? So I think that we'll see an increase in our 1% tax, which goes right to affordable housing. I think it will support more 513s because it will help cut down on the abuse of the accessory structures, which we're seeing.
I gotta take exception to that. It doesn't really matter if we don't know who the name of the person is. They're getting a tax bill. We know how to get a hold of them. It's not like there's some mysterious entity that is floating out there with no contact info. They're real. It's a
Actually,
real address.
In terms of sort of direct, quick intervention, that's not the case. That you have LLCs that own properties, and if there's a problem going on and they don't use a realtor, you don't know who to get in touch with.
But I was talking before you got to I'm talking about the registration.
Oh, gotcha. I
Piece of
see.
it.
I'm sorry, I
That
misunderstood.
we know who these people
Yeah.
are, and then you get the contact information there.
But I
And you
think,
get it up front.
I think a really important component of this is requiring that there be a local person to contact.
And it has to be local, because I remember when they were doing the fire alarms, people who were in New
Right.
York were putting themselves down as a contact
Yeah.
for February.
I'm just thinking another thing to consider is what the IRS does with rentals, especially if you're gonna have $1,000 registration fee if somebody wants to go on vacation, and just rent their house out for 2 weeks. What do
Right.
they need to do?
Good question. So in other words, if you are renting your house for 2 weeks or less, you don't have to register. So the way the IRS works is if you rent your house for 2 weeks or less, it's not reported income. Just, right? Isn't that how it works?
It is, but it's very limited.
Very limited?
Yeah, very small amount of people only rent for 2 weeks.
Right, yes, right. Yeah, definitely.
Not even worth how big of a
Yeah, okay, great.
not much to say, but it is a good idea.
Yep.
that,
Yep.
you know, if they're renting for income.
Right.
But they might wanna know that they're not violating the law for just going away for 2 weeks also.
Okay, I have that on our list, 2 weeks. Or de
So-
minimis.
So one other question, Nick, and again, I know I'm asking questions that probably sounds negative, but I'm supportive of this concept. I just want to make sure as we work through the details. On the 2 people per bedroom, it's an interesting concept to me what happens if you've got a 2-bunk bedroom? And you got 4 beds in there, and it's kids, and. No, okay, or they're 13 or whatever. I mean, I guess I'm just trying to get through the math of like, again, I guess I'm trying to think about
So
enforcement.
for
and-
me, the capacity, this is just speaking
Yeah,
for myself.
capacity, yeah.
For me, it's capacity of septic and capacity for parking. I don't really care whether 5 people come out for vacation and they all want to sleep in the same bedroom.
Oh, I agree
That's-
with that.
that's my
And that's sort of,
So I think, I don't want to be presumptuous, but I think it was suggested, the limitation on number of people per bedroom was to get at those 2 things. So for me anyway, if you can get at those things, that's, I don't. I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of head shaking. I actually thought it was worthwhile to have a conversation. Shame on me, I guess.
No, septic, it's a homeowner's problem, not the town.
No, it is I would argue that environmental impacts are actually the town's concern.
I would, I don't know if I'm correct, but I believe that the way the septic, regs are, they use a calculation, an average calculation of 2 people per bedroom. And, in my business, we use that same calculation, maximum to 2 people per bedroom. So that would kind of be the occupancy allowed, and we would also, hopefully that's tied into the septic thing. But that ultimately belongs to the homeowner's responsibility, it's their septic system. But that 2 people per bedroom, I think, is kind of standard. So,
And while you're at the mic, can I ask you a question too? So this, I know a lot of us are hung up, including me, on the 12 years old to be a person. I believe that real estate agent, like, that you can, a toddler is a person.
we pick a number that's probably as arbitrary as that.
Right.
In my office, we usually say anybody 3 and under, 2 and under, we don't count. But once they're using the facilities.
Right, right, that makes sense, yeah.
They're, contributing to the usage of the
Yeah,
building. So
Right.
usually, 2, 3, 2 or 3.
sort of out of diapers, basically.
Out of diapers,
Yeah.
they're
Right,
real people.
gotcha.
And just a comment on the parking, and I don't know if you've heavily been looking at Newport, because I think Newport has a lot of this.
Oh, yeah, they have
this
a lot.
But Newport is also densely urban.
Yes,
With many rentals downtown. I think I have like 2 rentals downtown where we might be worried about parking.
Mhm.
Most of the houses that we handle, parking is not an issue. They're not competing for on-street parking.
right,
So it's not, a real
yeah.
red ticket item for most of the houses, I think, that are being rented.
But septic capacity is, right? From your,
Well, again, septic capacity, I don't consider my agency to be the enforcer. But typically, if you've got 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms, the living space is appropriate for
Right.
the number of bedrooms that you have. So we list and advertise houses and put a maximum occupancy based on those figures.
right. Yeah. I understand that they do. I'm not talking about the wonderful thing that you do. That's the important, bright line. Yeah, please.
It is a wonderful conversation, and I'm glad that we're all here.
Yeah,
The timing of the conversation is a little odd, in the beginning of August, when that's all of our craziest time, but I
Yeah.
understand it happened that way. We are here because we're concerned.
Yeah.
And we are trying to be above the law and carry on our rentals smoothly for our owners, for our town, for ourselves. If there are other people that are causing this concern, whether it be Airbnb, VRBO, owners that are renting as absentee owners, perhaps they should be invited to this conversation, so it doesn't feel like we're being defensive about this. But if they're the ones that are causing the concern, then let's invite them
sure.
into being part of it, because otherwise it seems like it's us, and I sincerely don't think it's any of us.
No, I don't either.
I do feel like this is addressing concerns, and if there are concerns, let's address them, but this document seems like it's a monster compared to what some of these concerns may be. A parking plan, you know, if you have a 4-bedroom house and a car only has 2 people, you're getting into some crazy math here that doesn't really make sense.
So I actually agree. That's why I wanted to start by describing what we asked Nick to do, which was to sort of dump everything into a document. That was, so we have to start with some words, and that was what we were trying to do. Not, you know, I mean, there's.
Another concern may be like an owner just contacted me the other day and said, oh my gosh, my husband said, oh, I want to rent my house in August. If they have it registered by January 31st, do I say?
Oh, that's a good point.
You
Yes.
know, there are last minute
Yeah.
situations, and so I don't think there should be necessarily a deadline on that. If they're gonna fill out the paperwork and pay the registration, then it should
That's a
be
good point.
anytime.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to that, that's a really good point. So maybe, so this is what, I guess what Keith is saying and Nick is saying too, is that we had to put something together. So a lot of this might be out of like Middletown's, you know, so maybe Middletown has a much bigger problem with parking. So the language is like super harsh on parking, which isn't, as you say, very applicable to us. But what the point you just brought up would be something to consider. We would just have to check on the, I don't know what the, you two would know better what the legality of like having a rolling registration deadline is. I mean, my guess would be that you have to have the permit in hand before you take a deposit.
So as drafted, you can actually register at any point. The registration period ends in December. But you can register at any point. The fee is not prorated. That's just something as drafted. If you want to prorate it, you can prorate it. But you can actually register at any time.
So can I ask a question? What about the 7-night minimum, which I've had 2 comments about? Require a minimum number of nights.
So what Keith is talking about is at the last meeting that we had, there were a couple people, and we did get some correspondence about this, with this suggestion in it as well. And the suggestion was that not in every zone, in residential A in particular, that the ordinance specify that you could not rent for less than 7 days. So that would alleviate some of the stress that neighbors are feeling towards some houses that, you know, Airbnb, and they like turn over every 3 days or every 4 days. And so they're getting, you know, I mean, we all know, right? Every time a house turns over, there's the house checker and the real estate agent and the cleaners and the laundry drop off and the pool person and the gardener and the lawn person, you know, like, so every house has like a lot of services attached to a turnover. And what I think the reason that came up at the last meeting was that neighbors are feeling like once a week is enough for that. Right? I think, is
Yeah,
that
that's-
correct?
yeah.
And that by having a minimum in that zone, not in every zone, we could alleviate that.
Again, I don't think we're the ones that are renting. No.
Right, exactly.
Or is that strictly during the summer? I mean, in the off-season when there are
Well,
lots of weddings and bird watchers, can we do?
I was
events
thinking the same thing,
To bring
actually.
income
Yeah,
for
yeah.
owners, but,
Contractors?
yeah.
Yeah.
But see, so in that case, I think we could write it in such a fashion that in a 7-day period, you could only rent it once. Right, so like if you're only renting it for the weekend, you would only be renting it once. That you wouldn't be then renting it to somebody else. There's gotta be some, right, there's gotta be some language for that.
On one turnover.
You understand what we're getting at there,
It
Nick?
also sounds very restrictive, and you just can't
Oh, yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Millie.
I understand what you're trying to do, but I also get a little weary about too much regulation and that the town is, what is the town doing to the cab drivers, or what are the town doing to hotels, or what are the town doing to stores? And a little too much regulation perhaps, although if it's needed, then I understand it. But, yeah, it just makes me a little uncomfortable that all of a sudden there's so much.
So you know what we're getting at here, right? There are houses that turn kind of into, so that's, I would say if you have some thoughts around a good way to do that, yeah,
Watching those
yeah,
homes that are,
yeah.
taking care of those homes, those owners who may be renting on their own.
Mm-hmm.
As somebody said, you just go on VRBO and put in our area code and you can find all of the rentals that are rented on the
Right.
VRBO or Airbnb. And I think part of this is almost reaching to the choir here because we feel like, we also feel that things are being, there is abuse out there.
Right.
Yeah, that's a question that I have. I mean, how much is this really going on? I have no idea. And I know one of the things that I think one of the things that's very misleading, when you go on to these sites, a place that rents by the week, the way their formula is and the way their platform is set up, it shows the per night cost for places that don't rent per night. And how many places really are there that are renting a couple of nights, turning over and over? I just don't have any idea.
My bet is it depends whether you're going to these guys or using one of the platforms.
So, people that are renting nightly are the people that are probably, I would say, people not renting with real estate agents or, not here regulating their own rental. Are
Yes.
probably the people we're trying to pinpoint here.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that aren't gonna follow the rules. If you say that you can only rent 4 nights or 7 nights or whatever, they're gonna do whatever they wanna do. So I think that the only way is to somehow find out that they're doing it and then stop it from happening with the town, like make it hurt their pocket.
And that gets to my enforcement comment earlier. I mean, I think that's where the,
But I think that psychologically, that's the only way to stop them from violating, because they're already violating things already. So to put more on it is just gonna make them not follow the rules even more. You know what I'm saying? They're just not, they don't care. And I don't say that there's a lot of people out there that are doing that, but the ones that are might be these issues. All know that the real estate agencies, we have strict leases.
Yeah.
We'll go to the house and kick them out if there's too many there, all of that. So it's really the ones that don't know the rules that are breaking them. If that makes sense.
Right. So first I want to say thank you all for showing up, because we should have started by saying that, because as Jennifer said, it is really busy and it is really hard to be here this time of year. I think, for all of you, for me, for everybody probably leaving work, right? And so this is just a conversation that we're going to continue. But it is a public meeting, it is open to everybody, right? So anybody who has a house that they're renting can show up at these meetings and hopefully will. But to what Rosemary just said, if you don't set an expectation, people can't meet an expectation. So we're setting the expectation, that we're trying to, hoping to, set an expectation, and then you can meet the expectation or fail, and then you'll be fined.
you could do that one, Go.
Gail Hines, is it possible to not include an owner that uses a real estate agency? Go after the 10 people that are doing it and stop us. Our owners are saying to us, you're coming after us again with another tax? They're doing what they're supposed to, they work with us, they pay us a commission, they're paying their money. It's the ones on the VRBO, the other ones, go after them. But leave the real estate agents, the owners that work with us, they're doing the right thing with us. And they're paying the 1%, they're doing all they need. So that's my thoughts on it.
So is that actually, would that even be legal to separate out like one format of renting over another?
I'd have to think it through, to be honest with you. I don't want to give you the knee-jerk reaction. There's issues that come to mind, but it's something we can get back to you on.
Hi, Pete. Yes, me too. So do I.
Do you have a sense of the scope of the problem on the island? I mean, the real question is you're adding a lot of overhead, a lot of administration, a lot of cost to a lot of people, maybe catch very few people, and you haven't figured out how to catch them anyway.
So I don't know if we're actually looking at one specific problem that we want to fix. I think we're looking at many solutions here. I can tell you that this week, there was a real estate agent, listing two accommodations on one property. That's a violation. So there are violations out there, and what we're looking to do is overall increase our number of 513s, increase adherence to the zoning, solve some problems for neighbors.
Creating a lot of rules, a lot of work. I haven't seen how you're gonna actually
Here's the thing,
these people.
I don't think anything in here,
Pete, as I said, we started with a draft that takes everybody's into account. I get it, yes, yeah.
but I'm going to be honest with you, Pete, I don't think anything in here is a problem for you. You're doing all this. Pretty much everybody in this room is doing,
Charge me somewhere between $200 and $1,000.
You, 5. Feed the dog.
Thank you.
I think it would be really, about septic systems, that's our major concern.
Sure,
Always in
same here,
homes,
actually.
And numbers of people, and if somebody's throwing bulkheads in rooms, and it's always the reminding what your septic is, I think that should really be a big piece.
I have to say, it's central among my concerns,
Okay,
is
it's not
the septic thing. That's kind of, that concerns me.
I mean, just Rosemary, and
Come, Rosemary.
maybe, I think a good point, and in my head, I'm thinking about 513s. There have been a lot of 513s that have turned into rentals. They took the kitchen out, or they added it into the house, or anything like that. So maybe this situation and this plan is done in phases, and you sort of tack what's important first, and you do it in phases, then trying to pass everything at once in one broad way. You know what I'm saying?
We're working on an ADU
Yeah,
ordinance as well. Yeah.
start with that and phase it, and then get to where, and then through those phases, you'll probably learn a lot about other things that are happening, and a better way to penalize or to get it straightened out. So, because it's hard to attack everything at once, and I do think 513s are important.
Nick, do you have a lot of notes?
Lots.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Molly, did we miss anything?
nope, I think the only one thing I would say is that anybody who has suggestions, we've gotten some really, really good correspondence
we have.
with great suggestions.
Yeah.
And, which I really appreciate, right? I mean, you
Yes,
guys appreciate, like,
absolutely.
and I just hope more people will correspond and give their feedback, because that is going to help us, it's going to help Nick redefine the document a little bit.
Terrific.
Well, and if we can go back to what Jennifer, timing is everything. We start booking new reservations November, December, January. So maybe right before that is to have a really good conversation, because we're starting and ending and starting.
Yeah, but I hate to say it, if we don't start now,
No,
yeah, that's why I agree with you, timing sucks for all of us.
Input from a lot of
Right,
people that are
right.
putting in, that's when it's all starting, just for your notes.
You're right, and I believe honestly, this is the best time to start it, because it's gonna take 3 months, then it'll get traction, then somebody will pop up that we didn't even know, and that'll be at the beginning of rental season, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the,
Prioritize concerns, so it's not like parking should be first.
No, I
Yeah.
think septic,
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think we're,
No,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I think that's very helpful. Martha?
you know, I'm sorry, I dealing with a doctor's office, that's why I had to leave a couple times. I'm circling back to the whole thing with the number of beds, and I think we're pretty much in agreement that that's like lunacy. But I think the objective is how many, if you have 4 bedrooms and you have 2 people, I think you're really looking at a total of 8 in the house. Isn't that what we're really looking at? Instead of how many
about
beds
the
there
septic,
are in a,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
Because we're not going to talk about how many, who's sleeping with
Yes.
whom.
I have a motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. We're adjourned.